So now that I've got this thing set up, we're going to go ahead and use the projection or the render to texture to go ahead and render out each side of that cube as a separate bitmap that we can then use. So let's go up to rendering, open up the render to texture menu, and you'll notice that because I've got the box selected, it already pulls it up right there. And generally this will come up and say no projection modifier. I can just go ahead and select that projection. So now generally what you'll see a lot in a lot of tutorials is when you open up this window, this is basically the default settings that you'll see. The projection mapping will not be enabled and there won't be a projection modifier. And basically it'll just kind of give you the option to you say pick and then pick the objects that you want to project to, and that'll just add a projection modifier to the stack of the object you have selected. I've kind of done the reverse and set up the projection stuff ahead of time so that I don't have to do that out here in the projection window. I can just enable that and then pick that projection modifier from the stack, and because that's the only one I've got, that's the only option I get. I'm going to open up options. You'll notice in my ray mist color, what I've done is actually set this color to be 127, 127, 255. The reason I've done that is basically that 127, 127, 255 is basically equals a normal value of 0. So it's pointing directly out from the surface. I'm gonna change this to red. So when you're editing your cage, and we'll get into this a little bit later on when we get more complex, I'll set it to a bright red color so that I can see where the errors are and kind of clean up that projection cage. And then when I'm done with that, I'll go ahead and set it to 255 or 127, 127, 255. And the reason I do that is because if I do have any errors left in my normal map, if I'm still getting a few pixels here and there that have errors in them, if I set that ray mist color to equal a value of pointing straight out from the surface, you'll get a nice flat area in your normal map. You won't see some weird wonky error in your normal map when you go to take it out to the game engine. So that's one way. I'm kind of trying to stress here that you can spend a lot of time cleaning up the projection and still have some errors in there. So just by setting that to 127, 127, 255, that'll just help clean that up a little bit so you don't have to be so precise and spend too much time cleaning up your cage. So now that I've got that set up, I'm going to come down here and you notice I've turned off object level right here in the UI. I'm just going to turn that off because I really only want to render the sub-object levels which correspond to these sub-object levels right here in my projection stack. I'm going to come down and set up a couple maps to render. So I've got, if I just click on add, you can see I can add a complete map which will basically add all of these, or I can pick individual ones, for instance specular, shadows, blend, alpha, height. I've also already added a diffuse map, a light map, and a normals map. So now that I've got those added, let's just hit render and see what happens. Just continue that. So what you're seeing here now is basically it's rendering all 6 sides of the cube individually. So normally if you were to just render this at the object level of the stack, it would try to render all 6 sides of the cube at once, and because you've got overlapping UVs, you just get a bunch of garbage. So this is a nice way to kind of split up your character. Say if you want a separate normal map for like the skin, hands, and the hands and face, you can make that material ID 1, create your selection, project that down. We'll see a little bit of that a little later on.